So why don't we have, why don't we do the Pledge of Allegiance for anyone who'd like to do that?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to a special meeting of the Silverton Board of Trustees. It's January 30th and the time is 6:03 p.m. and I call this meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Trustee Davis. Here. Trustee Crane.
Here.
Trustee Harper.
Here.
Trustee Bierman.
Here.
Trustee George. Here. Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
Here.
Mayor Furman.
Here.
All board members in attendance today.
Thank you very much. Do we have any revisions to tonight's agenda?
Staff does not.
No.
Okay, great. In that case, we can kick this off with the, do we still need to do, we don't have any Zoom attendees or in-person attendees, but as a special meeting, would we still need to do a public comment at the open and close of the meeting to meet protocol or no?
Not according to our code.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay, in that case, the first item on our agenda is resolution 2023-01, a resolution of the town of Silverton to authorize the expenditure of up to $1,070,340 for the purpose of applying for DOLA grant transformational housing.
Do you want to kick this off, Anthony, or do you want me?
Sure. This, and just to be clear, that resolution for the expenditure is up to financing agreement to lease purchase. That would be to primarily for the construction of the actual dwelling units that we're looking at in this project. So that expenditure would not be a direct expenditure out of the budget right now. That would be a commitment to lease purchase. And I think that's the primary details of that resolution. If Administrator Kashberger, if you'd like to clarify or expand upon, please do so.
I'm sure, like, I would agree with that, that if we were to, when we do potentially get this grant, we would enter into a lease purchase agreement. And at that time, we would have to do an ordinance. This is just our commitment for the grant.
And Gloria, the big question we had at the last meeting was, is this within the budget or can we swing this if awarded the grant?
Sure. So I laid out a memo for you all in the packet that kind of explained our financing options. And I feel totally comfortable with it because this would be a short-term kind of lease purchase and would be paid back to the town. So I don't really see us being out any money for very long.
And so the lease purchase, the financing would be secured through those units that would be, and if you receive the money, you would be purchasing and building and developing. So it would be secured by those dwelling units. And so if you were in the next board meeting, I say the next board meeting, the annual board meeting or whenever, if you decided that you didn't want to continue to lease, then the bank would have that security. That's how that's secured, just because we can't bind going long term.
And I think I too wanted to clarify for the record, so the public knows, is that if and when these units were built and then sold, the town would not be the note holder, the lender. Like the individual purchasers would be securing their own funding through their own funding sources. And then the town would receive the payment for the cost of the house and apply that to decreasing the lease purchase debt.
Sure. And to give you a good example, the county went into a lease purchase for the apartments and then they built them. The difference is they decided to go, that's a rental unit, so they receive the rent back unless they refinance it or somebody else purchase that. Where we would be selling, this is an ownership program for people in the community.
I think a main question I had was just kind of on the risk that the town is taking on. I think I can definitely understand the rationale that there is a market for these to be sold at the prices we're talking about. And so I'm looking on page 16 with just the spreadsheet that shows kind of the capital requirements, the different funding sources, and all that was really helpful. And so if I understand it correctly, when it says the percentage of the town of Silverton, that 35%, that number is based off of the land, the tap fees and infrastructure that we would be putting in, and then the amount of the lease purchase agreement financing, right?
Financing that we're going to commit to, right? In the sense that we're going to commit and taking that out if we receive the grant. And then when, according to representatives at the Department of Housing, they've indicated that when we sell, we receive that money to backfill our finance agreement is number one.
Gotcha. We don't pay it back to the grantor.
No, I think there could be something in the future that we may share if we make the money, but they said that we receive the money back. That's how and so we would have that all clear before we would sign on, and we would know that before we sign on. Those are the kind of details that there's some nuances to, but we would know the answers to those upon being awarded and before we would engage in the full commitment.
And Anthony and Gloria, do you feel comfortable that even if the economy were to cool down, real estate market slowed or decreased, that the prices we're looking at, we would still be able to sell them for a price that would recoup our investment or our costs? So I believe so. And we've looked, I don't like quoting numbers right now because we still are having some changes in some of the standards and the performance of the funding entities and some of the efficiencies and stuff. So the numbers are moving a little bit, but they're not very much right now. And I know that can make you nervous, but in the 5%, we are in a neighborhood where we can go up to 140% AMI. The county would rather like us to stay at the 80% AMI, but we are in a neighborhood that even at the 6%, if we're at 6% interest rates or people, depending on the family size, because the AMI depends on your family size, we're falling into where they're interested. But I don't want to do is say a price range. I have a range on there, but I don't want to say a price range and somebody with, it can be, it's more complex than just committing to a sale price right now.
No.
You both feel comfortable that the price at which we could sell them would recover the town's interest?
I do. I believe that the prices that they are right now with the interest rates that they are right now, and those interest rates, there's interest rates that are fixed that are available for first time or homeowners and others, that we're in a pretty nice spot and that they can get in and not worried about a lot of uncertainty going ahead. I mean, we should always be concerned about uncertainty, but I'm not worried that the uncertainty ahead is such that we're going to move out of that range. There'd be a big change. Yeah.
And I'm not a politician. I do real estate and I would like to use specific numbers tonight. I understand that we're not committing to these numbers, but I want to talk specifics.
Yeah.
The range we're talking about, so that anybody who watches this, is between $150,000 and $275,000 for a purchase price for 2 and 3 bedroom units.
Yes.
That's amazing. Like there's nothing in Silverton that comes anywhere close to that. And even if there was, it would likely need a huge rehab. So I think that that's a really cool target. If I'm understanding the numbers correctly, we're somewhat potentially risking our down payment. It looks highly likely that we'll recoup all of the cash that we would be out, but the loan itself of up to $1.07 million, we would only need to sell 9 of those units at $100,000 to recoup that money. So that seems like a really safe bet. We also would probably need to add in whatever the interest and fees. So maybe we're talking about like 9 units at 125, but that's like selling 3 bedroom units at $125,000 is like, that should be something that most folks in Silverton that have consistent income should be able to afford, I think. I did have a quick question. The numbers that we're being asked to approve with the $1.07 million loan or up to, and then the $439,162 that we've already authorized. Can you walk us through how those two numbers, which total of almost exactly $1.5 million, match up with that spreadsheet on page 16 where it talks about the town covering 35% of the $3.875 million? Or am I'm just not totally understanding the spreadsheet. So I was just hoping we could.
So to be clear, initially, we're asking for more up to finance. So we have a leeway right now than what it actually that is. What's going to be required. I'm going to let Gloria, do you want to weigh in on this one?
Yeah, I can jump in on that one. So in the resolution, it says up to that $1 million amount mark because on that page, let's see, I think it's page 16 of our packet. We state that 664 would be $664,448 would be part of would be our loan. But this isn't including if we wanted to keep a unit potentially to rent out for ourselves. So that's why we built in that contingency over to potentially do the long. My assistant is a cat. Sorry, I have to find myself. But that would be, so let me back up there. So it would be $664,000 would be our loan commitment. But what we did in the resolution was we went up to $1 million. So that if we wanted to keep a unit, we would have that option to do that.
That clarifies my question. Thank you.
And I'm sorry, like really solid answers right now because this is such a giant loan or a giant application that we're trying to get through within 3 weeks of it being announced. So we're definitely there's definitely some things that would be up in the air until we actually got the grant, and we'd be doing some background work in between.
Yes, I think that the other thing it's important to realize, if the state were to come back and say, we can only do X amount right now, or we have this much left in the fund right now, and it was 2.2, that leaves us an opportunity to meet again. It shows them that we have a different type of opportunity with, or that or the board is not, I won't say committed all of the money right now, but that they have agreed to look at more money than maybe we need right now if they want to come back. It leaves it open. I don't think they'll push back on that, but I think it leaves an opportunity if they're running at the end of the funding cycle, the amount of funds for them to come back. And if there's a $200,000 difference, then they would come talk to us. They'd be open to talking to us.
I know we don't have the housing details nailed down yet for sure, but can you speak a little bit to how we would think about this being deed restricted? Because I know that's a concern I've heard. And if we're talking about selling them at very much below market rates, I would be concerned as a town board member or a town taxpayer that we are paying the cost for these homes, selling them to someone at a very affordable or attainable rate, and then potentially someone turning around and selling it for a profit. Maybe not in the first transaction, but maybe in 5 transactions. So how is that accounted for to protect the town?
So all of these homes will be deed restricted. Any of the homes that are sold under this development will be deed restricted. Now, the caveat of that is if we don't get this grant and we go to a different model and we need to build some and sell them at market, but under this program and under this proposal right now, there's none of them all of them will be deed restricted.
And you talk in more detail about what you mean by deed restricted?
Sure, there'll be only an appreciation price. There'll probably be first right of refusal. There's some different models we've looked at, but before any sale goes through, you'll be able to look at those and how you want them. to be. I mean, we don't have the final, and part of that is we want to know what they're wanting and the details of what they're wanting on that, and then we can see what we
When
can
you say
add
they, you
to
mean
the
GOCO?
Department of Housing.
Department of
Yeah,
Housing.
and the granting institution, we want to make sure that we need to meet their criteria first and then see if it's sufficient. Make sure that we aren't putting any restriction that they're not allowing. But nobody has mentioned anything that would keep us from restricting. I think it's important when we have that discussion to understand we need people to be able to appreciate values. So they're interested in upkeep and those type of things. There's different nuances to that, but anyway.
Well, I mean, based off the CHA model, there was a statute of limitations on that, right? So it was whatever it was, 7 years or 10 years, and then it went back to the market. The Colorado Housing Authority houses that were built previously.
Well, the Colorado Housing Authority, we're not going to use that.
Okay,
But there's a second part of that. Those were done, just to give a little brief history for everyone, those were done for the benefit of the nonprofit. The nonprofit dissolved. So there's nobody to exercise their right to, and that's how that ended up happening. Now, the first bill that was done where Jane and the family we didn't have deed restrictions at that time.
yeah,
I will say this, 4 of those 5 homes are all by working people in this community still. There were deed restrictions on the other, those ended up selling, and they were able to sell because the entity dissolved. We need to make this for the benefit of the people of San Juan County and the town of Silverton, even though the San Juan County is not going to be on this, but we need to make the benefit in case there was ever a merger between the town and county or something else happened. I'm not suggesting that to anybody, just to be clear, do not repeat that I was suggesting it, but we need to make sure that those have the counties for the benefit of the people of the county on our restrictions, for sure.
okay, thanks.
What do you think, Jordan?
I don't know. I feel like you guys kind of taken all the questions I had. But it looks like a pretty good opportunity to me and worth taking a shot at, because this is definitely what we've been aiming for a while.
And I know this is all sort of, this is later in our packet, but it all sort of is tied in together. The county is happy with this, or the county is happy with this development agreement contract.
Yes, they actually drafted it. Clay looked at it. I think, Clay, you could weigh in on the changes you made. I think there may have been an indemnification clause that, because it is another agreement had been done before, not between governments, but Clay?
Yeah, I mean, I reviewed it. The version we have in front of you, is good to go. Originally, there was some things in there that needed that we, constitutionally couldn't enter into because of Tabor and indemnification and a bunch of boring legal stuff you probably don't want to hear. But we had that part removed and worked with the developer, and the current development agreement is solid.
Great, thank you.
Jim or Sally?
Yeah, Anthony, would you mind? Thank you so much, by the way, Anthony. This is a really healthy packet, and I think it answered a lot of our questions, and a lot of my questions have been answered previously. And so I just wondered if you could elaborate a little bit on the role of the county, just for the public to understand, like how the town and the county are interacting on this project. And I wasn't able to go to that meeting last week, but I think that you had a meeting with the county. And so just for everybody's understanding, how are we, what's our relationship in this project?
Sure. First, let me just say, I appreciate your appreciation. And I know, I think it probably carries from all of you. It's been a team effort. A lot of people, Lucy, Bevan, and others, Gloria, and others have been helping. And in all kinds of ways. So the county has the property. We needed site control. and meaning the town needed site control. The way to do that, the easiest way would have been for them to deed over the property to us. That was a very short timeline for them to do so. They agreed to sell, I think, are we still at 10,000? Is that $1,000, $10,000?
$1,000 per.
Yeah, per lot. We don't need to go into that, right? Anyway, the idea was that the county, we would commit to meeting some of their criteria, but that the county would deed these over to us or do a development project or agreement. And so in the ideal world, we would wait till we receive the grant to actually exercise our purchase of those in an effort to just to minimize the paperwork of the transfer. But we have rights to those to develop in the next couple of years, as long as we go forward. And as soon as we are ready to develop on those, we can enter into that. We can go ahead and have that pass over. They were pretty supportive. They want us to be successful, and that's why they decided to do that and to transfer those for, I think the total was 10,000. I need to go back and look at the money on the agreement. I haven't looked at it since it's been changed. Clay told me it was good. I trust Clay. Like, so does that answer your question, Sally?
Yeah, that's great, Anthony. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Have we talked to the county about like if they could do this all over again with their apartments? Are they happy that they kept them as rentals? Would they have preferred to have sold them off? Like, do they have any thoughts, being a number of years into that project, about pros and cons of rentals versus sales? And I understand that this financing is proposed based on a sale model or a mostly sale model, but I'm just curious.
I think the way that was developed under a rental type of design, I mean, literally, I think it makes it it makes it more difficult. And we haven't had that discussion informally. I think those are some discussions we should have going forward, whether it be on the rest of the area and property down at in Anvil that's left to be developed as well, for us to have a good idea through these processes, what's going to happen, or what we should consider happening at the Zanoni property. Is a high density, it's a density increase in site areas with maybe a common space, a model we need to start looking at and looking at selling. I'm a big fan of ownership, and letting people be a part of the community and have where they want to be. Some people want to rent, that's great. But I think there's a lot of people in the community that I'm hearing that would like to own and just don't have that opportunity. And to the extent that we can facilitate that, whatever that looks like, I think within our means and with everything else, I think we should be doing so on both the county and town level.
I agree that the priority right now should be sales. I'm just thinking we have 42 units anticipated in the relative near future. And I'm curious if there's, we should do some analysis, I think, to see if some portion of those should be rentals, because rentals can often be like a stepstone to people becoming permanent community members and homeowners.
And probably design should be made. We should probably be thinking about design, particularly on density type of projects, on where they could be converted over easily to ownership from the rental. I think that's what you're inferring or alluding to.
And some people just aren't in a position to buy currently, and maybe they will be in 5, 7, 10 years, but having some of those rentals is really important, especially given the rental market right now in town.
What is it? I don't have my finger on the pulse. What is it right now? Generally, are you hearing,
there's just no inventory
for rental?
Yeah.
Okay.
And all that too is defined in our housing study, as well as the CHAPA SHIP analysis that they did for us. And that includes like a second phase to this project would be some rental units. So starting off with this and then moving on to those rental units.
And I believe those rentals are at the end of where the ownership are, in between that area and the rental, the current rental units. Is that correct, Gloria?
Yes.
Is that what you're talking about? 42, there where some of those units are? Okay.
Anthony, can you explain a little bit more on page 16 about the estimated town of Silverton financial cost? And then I get the price range and then the estimated income, just kind of where those numbers are coming from. Because I guess if I'm taking the lower number of 150,000 and saying that we sold 9 of them, that's like 1.3 million.
So I'm doing extrapolation from an average price where we have those price ranges, and then 10, and then subtracting what our loan is for from what those would come. That means that we could have as much as $1 million to put back into the housing. I also think that leaves us, the other idea of putting that together is that it leaves us some leeway if we have some families, if we have like a nuance when people are applying, where we don't need to necessarily make that much. If there's that we can see and adjust, the board could adjust to decide. Maybe not necessarily doing something individually for a family, but realizing that there's been an issue come up with these certain situations, and we feel like that we can, we don't have to recoup maybe some of the time that we put in, staff time or something, and we can come back on and revisit that.
Yeah.
That's the idea.
Gotcha. Building flexibility there.
Yeah, if this is awarded, we're in a nice position for us to look at things and be able to adjust and feel comfortable in doing so. And that's a lot better place than not knowing, being right on the margin. We're not right on the margin. I mean.
So will we have the flexibility to create ranges for different AMI brackets? So are all of the units, will all of the units necessarily need to be sold at the exact same price, or will we be able to adjust based on the need that we're seeing in the applications?
We can take, so the way this is working right now is we're taking interest and having priority, and we can look at where they fit in the AMI, and we can identify price ranges. And one of the ways to do that is before the first one is sold is to look at where people qualify, what they looks like, where they are, and what that might look like. And then we can make a decision of what we want our pricing to be on those terms versus telling everybody what they are to begin with. We can look at the board can look directly or set some individuals to look at what they would suggest to you, what those price ranges should be based upon what our families in the community, individuals, and I mean, I consider individuals our families too, but individuals and families are experiencing and seeing what seems right, and then we can set it like that way. It's if we have enough applications in, and I think we will as we get closer, we'll be able to make that determination and consideration ahead of time, which won't mean we're changing it after the fact, which can appear to be, maybe unfair to somebody.
That's my follow-up question, because I see, potentially like where we're talking about risk is making sure that we have a demand for the units and a demand at the price that we need to sell them to recoup costs on a loan. And then sort of the other end of that spectrum would be having a really high amount of demand. And I think this is getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, because I know that what we're doing tonight is applying for a grant to actually put the units in the ground. But I just can see that process being really, really transparent and clear up front will make it a smoother and a more fair process for applicants as on the on the end of like, yay, they're in the ground and now we're ready for people to be living in these, purchasing and living in these places.
Right, and assuming that we, or let's just say when we receive the grant, there's a couple of things that we need to talk about in like in the next 60 days. That would be what the deed restriction will, so people really do understand what that deed restriction is. And when they are going to back to their lenders to understand, their lenders can understand what that is and what terms they want. The county went through some of this already, and I think that there are some things that they worked through over a couple of years that'll help us be able to facilitate that. But in the ideal situation we would have by this summer, assuming that we're awarded and we're building, developing the foundations and excavating and water and sewer and everything this summer, right? We would be having individuals already financed and closing dates set. And so we would know, or we would have them financed and we would be able to have a work session, and it would probably be an executive session, and there wouldn't be names or anything else. It would be scenarios that were provided, and we would make a decision on those scenarios of what the pricing range would be. So you having reservations about that?
Yeah.
And
I mean, I think there's a lot of analysis to do before we get to that process. I have a bunch of like kind of random thoughts to plant as seeds today, but are more in the realm of what you're talking about that we're not deciding on tonight. And those are, I think we should be making sure that the duration of the deed restriction is as long as is legally possible. If these term out, like Tyler said, once they're gone, they're gone.
sure.
And so it's really important that they don't, or if they do term out, that the town has like an irrefutable right of first refusal to purchase them at whatever the, accumulated value could be. If it's locked in at 3% a year or something like that, we have the right to buy it if it does term out before the price would go to market price, things like that. And then also, like, what happens if these are all privately financed, what happens if there's a default? How do we have a pre-existing agreement with the bank where we can assume the property back on a default and the bank doesn't then turn around and try to sell it to somebody else without necessarily following our processes?
So the way that would work is
we don't have to answer that tonight. I'm just saying these are all the thoughts, but
Sure.
if you'd like to.
Well, I will answer that one. So one of the ways that that's been put into place before is that if there is a default and it goes into foreclosure, the community has a first right of refusal to purchase that house. And we would need to have probably over time to have a fund in case that happens. We could have it in our housing fund. That way, otherwise a bank will not lend to an individual if they don't have a right that they can go on the free market and get their money back or have some sort of.
For sure.
Yeah, and so it's critical. That issue is critical. I think it's all been worked out, but that's a big one.
And then what I was kind of chewing on when you looked at me was, whether or not we should explore a lottery system rather than the proposed, executive session, no names, but looking at all the factors. Like, I think if people qualify, they qualify. And we shouldn't necessarily be looking at, like, could we sell this one for $18,000 more because these people have a little bit more income? Like, I think if they're in the AMI range and they have the residency requirements or, security requirements or other things that fit all the boxes that we ask them to check, then it seems like the fair thing to do, or at least to evaluate, would be like, how have all of these other communities that have hundreds of units, dispersing them? And it seems like they're usually doing lotteries within the category.
And we're doing a priority list right now. And let's just make an assumption, because that's all we can do right now. I'm saying that if we have a priority of 10 families and they're going to be in different AMIs, because those families will probably have different people in them. We look at them, see what those type of families can offer or what they can qualify for. Because an AMI, a family of 4, you can only sell their AMIs up to a certain amount. Whereas a family, like an individual, is not going to qualify for as much. And so are we going to say that if there's a bunch of families of 4, okay, that they have a higher AMI that they can afford? Are we going to say that we're going to sell the houses the same as we would to an individual? I don't want to answer that right now.
So, yeah, and I agree that's a good question, but that isn't, I don't know that that should be our decision factor. That's our pricing factor, but not who actually gets it.
No,
Like,
no,
I
no,
think
no, no. The priority
I want to
list,
make
the
sure that
priority list is
the priority list sounds bad. That sounds like a subjective thing. Like, I'm just saying, like, we need a system in place where people have a certain deadline to apply. If they qualify, they get put into a pool that gets randomly selected of who has the opportunity to buy. Like, there shouldn't, like, a priority list sounds like there's a secret group of names that's on a list already and that nobody need apply. I'm not saying this is the case,
there's
but
one,
it sounds like.
there's one person that's on the priority list because they have a full application in right now.
That's not what I'm asking,
Yeah.
and that's not what I'm suggesting.
But we're talking about two different things, I think also. So one is you were talking about maybe changing the price dependent on if it's a single person or a family buying.
There's a matrix that we probably should discuss. And I don't think that's what the mayor is talking about right now.
I know. And then there's the other thing, which is how do we decide who gets what
Mhm.
or who can be on the list? And obviously, I think the initial criteria should be, did you do all the paperwork and meet all the deadlines, right? That immediately
Mhm.
And do
to
you
make sure,
qualify?
and do you qualify? And then after that, how do other places do it? Do they do a lottery or do they? I think that's something that we should look into and see how other.
I just don't want there to be any potential perception that like you or any other individual is saying like, oh, I know so-and-so and their application looks good. I also know so, or I don't know this other person, but their application looks good. We'll go with the person we know. Like, I want to make sure that this process is designed in a completely objective and fair way.
Sure. And so right now, let me tell you what we're doing. If you want us to stop, you need to let us know because we need to let a lot of people know because we've already advertised it. There is a priority system that if you get everything in complete, substantially complete, right? That's your number one. And the next person or family that comes in, you're number two, number three. Then when these are built, number one gets to come back and they have a certain amount of time. We haven't decided yet. You all have to decide.
So my knee-jerk reaction is that doesn't sound fair. Because we don't even know what the units are. We don't know the cost yet. We haven't even talked about what the qualifications are. So how can we be putting people in a priority list already? I think you could have everybody up to a certain date into the future. That's all part of that group. But that can't be something that's like, because you turned it in yesterday with things that we've already put out about a project we know very little about, you get to choose first. Like that sounds like nepotism in like a locals way, as opposed to like a blood relation way, but that doesn't sound right to me. It's my knee jerk. I could be totally off base, but that's how I feel.
When you all,
Can I interrupt here real quick? I just wanted to kind of keep us focused.
Perfect.
Yeah. I agree. I'm way off on a tangent. I want to.
It sounds like we'll need to eventually talk about, the qualification, but we don't even have the funds to build these houses yet. So I would just keep us focused on tonight's topic of focusing on the grant.
Which I think sounds like an amazing opportunity and what we've all been waiting for, and we probably won't have another chance like this in the near future.
And we're talking about details at this point. I think like the big picture all sounds great. Jim?
Thank you so much. No, this conversation's been fantastic. I hope it's filled in all the gaps that we were lacking last week. I know for me, any trepidation or pause that I might have had have been alleviated. For our community, what this does is it gives folks that might not have been able to a true sense of ownership, a true sense of community, belonging, stewardship. And I'm all for that. And I know we're going to have questions along the way. I know we're going to have gaps that we're going to have to fill in. We're going to have continued discussions like this. But I think where we're at this point, this is a good thing. And we need to provide that up and down vote and move forward on this.
And one thing I might suggest too for, if to kind of move forward in talking about this is maybe we do a little committee or task group within the trustees so that we can kind of work some of the stuff out like we would in a committee, or it can be assigned to a committee to start working on that and getting some of those ideas, because this is a big project and we're going to need as many minds as possible.
Was it the
I'm
intention?
fully, sorry, go ahead, Shane.
Oh, just another quick question that's probably a tangent to cut me off with, but is it the intention to talk about the strategy behind whether or not we would try to retain one of the units? Because that was mentioned a couple times in the packet, or is that just for another discussion?
And that would probably be for another discussion, because we still need time to kind of hash out the details of what that would look like. We just wanted to make sure that applying for this grant, we would have that opportunity if we wanted it.
Well, this, like Jim said, this definitely answered all the questions that we had last time and makes me feel super confident in the financing approach. Sally, I cut you off.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I feel really good about it. I think it would actually be somewhat irresponsible to not go forward with applying for this grant. Everything is in place, and it's an amazing rebound from a few weeks ago when we found out that we weren't going to get a different one. And so I think I also just wanted to note in some of the materials that it makes me so happy that we have such good input on our master plan. I think it looks like when we go to apply for grants like this, I just wanted to call to the surface that having had that groundwork laid in our community makes us more eligible for huge funding opportunities like this. And I think that's pretty significant in a huge community achievement. So yeah, I just think whatever we need to do to move forward with applying for this grant is I'm on board for that.
I think too, just calling that out to recognize staff and San Juan Development Association of how much work has been done over the past 18 months to get us to this point is really significant, that we're well positioned because of the pre-planning and work that a lot of people have already done. So that's huge in a strategic sense. Something that the community out there, if anybody's listening, could celebrate.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt resolution 2023-01. That's me, of the town of Silverton, to authorize the expenditure of up to $1,070,340 for the purpose of applying for the Transformational Affordable Housing Grant Program administered by DOLA.
I second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Trustee Davis.
Yes.
Trustee Kränker.
Yes.
Trustee Harper.
Yes.
Trustee Bierman.
Yes.
Trustee George.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
Yes.
Mayor Furman.
Heck, yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, I'll make a motion to adopt resolution 2023-02 of the town of Silverton to authorize the expenditure of $439,162 for the purpose of a down payment and build deposit to Colorado Building Systems, Inc.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Davis.
Yes.
Trustee Kränker.
Yes.
Trustee Harper.
Yes.
Trustee Bierman.
Yes.
Trustee George.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
Yes.
Mayor Furman.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
So the next item on the agenda would be item 3, approval of Anvil Mountain Subdivision Town County Development Agreement, which Clayton already let us know he's good with.
Yeah, if I can find it.
I'll make a motion to adopt the development agreement between the town and county for the build out of Anvil Mountain. There's just, looks like we're missing an F on that one.
Subdivision.
Oh, yeah. And just says motion to adopt development agreement between the town and county for a build out Anvil Mountain.
Oh, is that on my memo? Did I not?
Yeah. Okay.
It's a minor spelling error. I'll second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Trustee Davis,
Yes.
trustee Krieger,
Yes.
trustee Harper,
Yes.
trustee Behrman,
Yes.
trustee George,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney,
Yes.
Mayor Furman.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. The last item on our agenda is approval of the statement of assurances. Could someone walk us through what that is before we make a decision?
Sure. Those assurances that goes in the applicant statement, we're saying that we possess, or that the body so the signing authority has been granted already. And we'll need to get that documentation paper tomorrow from the signature authority from the last meeting for Gloria and myself, but that you possess the legal authority to execute the proposed project in general. That's number one. That housing and urban development in the state can look at our records and books and documents as it relates to the grant, which is what any granting institution expects. That we've provided a description of the activity to determine eligibility under the funding that's offered, and we'll comply with those requirements. That's 3 and 4. And then 5, will refrain from discrimination with respect to housing program benefits and employment. And then taking affirmative steps to promote fair housing for all, regardless of race, color, religion, the protected classes, veteran status, mental illness, and any other transgender status, and all other federal or state protected classes is what it basically is. So that would be not only us, that will have to be passed down to our people on site, and they'll need to sign those, as well as the entity that is building these have to comply with this as well. So we'll provide the documentation for that. And then the 6 has provided and for and encouraged citizen participation. And that participation has been included by low and moderate income individuals who are residents where these funds are going to be spent. That's been done indirectly, I think, through the health assessment, the CDAP, as it relates to public participation, but really community builders. The support of this body and the community builders process really reached out to everyone. So we have met that. Now, was it particularly to this actual project? No, but to housing in general, and it'll fit within that criteria. So, and then I think the last, and so those are sub on 6, the participation, reasonable, timely access to local meetings. We've talked about this in local meetings. That would be our town board meetings. Originally, this project was presented. Anvil project was presented just a month and a half ago. Also, Anvil was presented inside the community builders meetings, and they've received other information from them today about those participation and how that was conducted. So, and then we had an open public meeting that we noticed in the newspaper, which is required, and we have proof of publication. We have that going in, and so we've met the criteria. And then anti-lobbying, BIRD anti-lobbying certification. That's why we're going to have Gloria sign this rather than me. But anyway, so we don't really fall into that category. We're not really involved in lobbying up in Washington, and so. Those are we wanted to make you aware of the assurances, and I wanted to make you aware primarily, and I put that on there because Gloria's been out and she's going to sign it, and I want you all to feel comfortable that we're there. I mean, I'm telling you I'm comfortable that we're there, but I want you to, yeah, so that's what it is.
I think we didn't quite talk about number 7, which was talking about the environmental review process. Is there anything there?
Where?
On page 77 of
on page 77. Okay.
Of the packet.
I'm about 7 of that part. Let's go there.
Yes, it's page 77 of the packet, 7 of that.
We can't spend federal funds until the environmental review process has been completed.
Yeah, so these are, Clay and Gloria and I have talked about And actually, the trustees have brought it up as well, that there's more questions that we'll answer as we're going forward and as we move forward. So that site was cleaned, was a former smelter site. It's been cleaned up. It has clearance from the environmental entities. However, they have not determined yet whether we would have to do a phase one and potentially a phase two, depending on what phase one said, which I can't imagine that phase two. But we may have to, they haven't determined yet whether, because this was a clean site and there's no indication that there's anything that's happened there. But we may have to do a phase one. I think that would be somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000. Those are the little things that come up. I'm not saying $5,000 or $10,000 is that's little, but I'm just saying that we may have to invest some of that, our money in that.
Not just because of the amount of time that's passed since the county completed the remediation project and today.
Yeah, somebody would come in and say, look around and talk to everybody and say, well, since it's been cleaned up, nothing's really happened on there except maybe Nico stored some wood on site. I mean, that's essentially what we're talking about, but we may have to do it. It's just
and as a percentage of the project compared to the importance of the project.
Right. It's the cost of doing business, and there's been too many people be burned. I will probably have to do it. I'm going to tell you now, but they told us that not to worry about that until just show us what's happened and we'll.
And phase ones can actually be pretty cheap. Like I had a phase one last year for $2,500.
Yeah. I'm using 5,000 because that's what you usually say, knowing that that's usually the most it'll be if it's a small area. Then there's bigger areas. Like all the sunny standings. Was there any other questions? Was that yours, Dana, or was that Sally's?
Great, yep. Do we need to make a motion?
I think you all, is there any concerns about the assurances and statement that we're gonna, that staff, Gloria and or I are gonna sign on here? I just want to make sure you all are comfortable right now. That's what we're committing to. If HUD comes in and wants to look at our books, I don't want anybody to say, what?
Do we need to make a motion for the approval of statement of assurances? Is that direction?
Gloria, would you like a motion, or are you okay with them just saying that's the direction? It sounds
I'm
like
okay with them just saying that's the direction now that they.
Yeah. Those are the main statements, and I just wanted everybody to be aware and be able to ask questions. That was the main.
So any objections to that direction?
That sounds good.
None.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you again for all your work on this.
Yeah.
I mean, this is
Exciting.
It's been a lot of staff effort, and we're learning things about after this grant too. So it's good.
And it looks like you've made a tremendous effort in the last week. So thank you for that.
Yeah, there were a lot of moving and questions, and yeah. It's all good. Thanks for everybody.
I kind of want to acknowledge Gloria for a second, because I just think that she's a champion. And I know, Anthony, you've put in a lot of work, and Lucy and Bevan and Beth. And I just know that Gloria's been managing some personal health issues, and you're a champion. And I know that you're working so hard on behalf of Silverton. And I just don't think that we could have gotten any more fortunate. You've just been like, it's great to see your face tonight. We missed you. And I know that you're so strong and working so hard for everybody.
You're here.
Yeah.
So thanks for everyone being here. Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted, Gloria.
I said I have an incredible team.
So thanks for everyone being here and putting in the time on this. It's good. And I think we're good.
there anything, do we know when they're making decisions again? Do you have that in the timeline? I know we saw it at one point, but.
No, I think we may get some idea like in a week if they're going to accept the application that we have or if they'll say it's incomplete. I say that only because there's a lot of areas that are unknown and there's just areas that are just, it doesn't apply to us, but it's required and they may have to work through that. But as soon as we know where we are and how we're moving forward, I mean, we may wait for a couple of correspondence if, if there's something said, but we'll let everybody know and we'll go from there and tango on, right? Yeah.
Awesome.
Love
Well,
it.
thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody. Our next meeting is on February 6th at 5 PM. That's a work session. And then we've got a regular meeting on February 13th at 7 PM. The time is 6:58 PM and I adjourn this meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good to see you.
All right.